Okay, maybe I think we can start and then we'll let participants join in. We're already over with 3 minutes. So, good morning to all of you and welcome to this webinar on unlocking GCC 2.0 practical insights on the PSF project submission form and PRC post-submission change preparation in terms of the documentation and others. So, first of all, let me welcome you all again. My name is Amit Thusu. I'm Senior Director at Global Carbon Council, and today we're having this webinar. This is sixth in the series. We've been this year and last year we've been conducting a number of webinars on GCC 2.0 to make stakeholders aware of our requirements and so on and so forth. So this year we had two webinars on 13th of Jan and 15th of Jan. And we had informed you that we'll be conducting two more webinars. So today is the next webinar in the series, and we're going to also have one more webinar, which will be an open house question and answer session. Completely, we're planning it on around 20th. You would have heard about it through our announcements. Just to before we can introduce our my panelists and my speakers here, let me provide a little bit of context setting to this whole thing. So you all know GCC 2.0, we started this last year. The objective was to provide a single window platform to enable project owners to contribute and to participate in the process of CORSIA, phase 1, pilot phase, and also Article 6.2, apart from other GCC requirements. We also launched AREC, which is an additional renewable energy certificate. So in that context, I think we had a number of stages. We launched the documentation by 1st of Feb, and then after that, we had also launched our projects portal. Our registry is also intact. We are trying to build, capacity of stakeholders, and that is this webinar is part of that whole thing. I hope you can hear me clearly, probably. Okay, I see nodding by Shivindu, so I assume that things are okay. I have a short presentation. Let me quickly, I will not take much time, but just quickly, just to give a little bit of whole an overview and brief about the whole GCC 2.0 and our preparations and how we have moved ahead of this. 1 minute. Okay, I hope you can see the slides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So as you all know, I think the objective was to also have different types of projects, including CCS, nature-based solution, and other type of projects, regular projects, and the outcome that we expect from the whole process is the approved credits, but also additional renewable energy certificates. So our GCC standard regulatory documents and framework is up and running. We have also been approved by CORSIA, ICROA. Projects portal is in public domain, is the new one, which is up and running. I hope many of you would have been able to join this new portal. Our registry is also up and running, though enhanced registry from S&P Global is also something which is in the pipeline. Hopefully by around middle of this year, we should be able to have an enhanced registry which will provide you with better functionality and better access and make life easy for all of us. Okay, so as I said, we launched on 1st of Feb. We had few regulatory documents available on our website on GCC 2.0. So when you see our website, you see there is there's an icon for under regulatory documents for 1.0 as well as 2.0. So if you wish to see the documents for 2.0, then you can obviously click them and you can toggle between those in order to see the documents under different versions of GCC. I wanted to actually update you on a few new documents. One is the GCC fee schedule, I think, which we launched, I think, a couple of weeks back. There is also another document on non-binding example for transition from GCC 1.0, 2.0 for environmental and social safeguards. So there's a new document available to you. Apart from this, there are other few documents which I'm going to talk about, but but this document would be covered by my colleague during the presentation today. And then we also have few documents on what to expect when you transition to 2.0. There are two set of documents, one for transition, when you transition for registration, and when you transition for issuance. So you can refer to it, you can look at those documents. These documents are going to give you clear-cut differences and advantages, disadvantages, and what will happen to few projects that transition, that do not transition, the deadlines, and so on and so forth. And then we also launched something called as project portal manuals. So the project portal manuals are something that will help you to navigate to the new projects portal. So there are three documents as of now that are available. One of them is if you want to change a letter of authorization, post registration, and what to do, and it can guide you through that process. There is guidance manual on account opening. It's the first thing to do if you want to log on to GCC 2.0 projects portal. And the first thing is to open an account, and this document is going to provide you good guidance on this. There's also a guidance manual on initiating post-registration change. So we all know that in order to transition to 2.0, your register documentation might have to, transition to 2.0, and post-registration change process is the process through which you can transition. So how to navigate through the website on the PRC is provided in this document. I would encourage you to refer to these documents, but I think also to some extent we will be also covering those documents in today's webinar. We also have the new projects portal. You can see the link is up and running as of now. Transaction registry up and running. We have made frequently asked questions also available. You can refer to them. There's also a YouTube channel for providing the recordings that have happened earlier. We are in sixth webinar as of now, so you can find. And lastly, but not the least, I think there is also help desk support for any queries or any clarifications. You can send email to operations@globalcarbon council.com with subject line GCC 2.0 queries. Okay, now let me also give you a little bit of idea about this. Reflects our website, and our website, you can see on the top, it provides links to GCC 1.0 projects portal and also GCC 1.0 projects portal. GCC 1.0 projects portal, you have been using to it. So if you want to go to, you just have to go and click there. And if you want to go to GCC 1.0, 2.0, you will just go to it and you will get access to it. And below this, you will find documents and so on and so forth. So this is how it looks like, a little enlarged picture. And then, so our old projects portal is also working as of now. New projects portal, you can see the landing page, but also the landing page of the S&P Global Registry. Apart from this, when you click and log in inside of each of those, you'll find information that appears in the three below figures. So we know GCC projects portal will not be used for new projects. It will stop. However, the older projects will continue. There is a timeline that's been provided in the transition documents for registration up to 2026 January. So after that, all the projects will be migrated to the new one. Okay, so yeah, this is how the landing page looks like for the new projects portal. You will have to log in with your passwords and so on and so forth and login ID. And once you do that, we will be able to access your project. Okay, so yeah, I think this is a short presentation just to get you familiar with the things here. Okay, now we know for today's webinar, we have few objectives. You would have seen the agenda was circulated to you. You know the topics that we are going to cover. So the first objective is to build capacity of stakeholders and build their confidence to enable them to start working on GCC 2.0. And this process should make this very comfortable to them. This webinar will also provide practical insights on how and where to start GCC 2.0 process. Of course, this webinar focuses on project owners and those that are involved in project development, the development of documents like project submission form and so on and so forth. But it also allows possibility to build capacity of VVBs, the validation verification bodies, and others that are involved in this process. So at this point in time, let me now take opportunity to introduce our speakers here today. So we have Mr. Shubhendu Biswas, who is Director at Global Carbon Council, is looking at registration, is looking at issuance, is looking also at regulations, but also digitization. And then we have Mayank Kumar, is Manager Climate Action, and looking at the regulatory part at the GCC. We also have Surya Mazumdar, who is Manager in Climate Action. With this, let me now take you through the agenda. So let me share my screen. Give me a second.
So we can see that screen. Yeah.
You can see the screen. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, you can see the screen. Yeah. I think few things here. For the first presentation, I already covered the context setting, and now we're going to go to the first presentation on guidance for opening accounts, how that will be done under the GCC 2.0 portal. We'll walk you then through project submission form template and the requirements. We'll also give you a snapshot of the requirements in the PSF in the version GCC version 1.0 and 2.0, the differences, and then take you through those exact requirements. We'll highlight those changes which are new as compared to the previous version. So that should give you confidence of how to start working on those documents and how to start working on in developing those new PSF to be complying with GCC 2.0 requirements. We are also going to, provide you, information with regard to how to assess no harm environmental and social impact requirements and also SDG contribution under GCC 2.0. Then lastly, we have Shubhendu Biswas, who will also talk about step-by-step approach on transitioning registered projects into 2.0 through the post-registration change process. So it's a combination of how to actually use the portal, is a combination of how to, what are the requirements and how to navigate through the PSF and other documentation. The PSF documentation obviously will be used for developing new projects, but also for in case you want to transition your older registered PSF into the new PSF. And then we have good enough time for question and answers. So we have close to 2 hours. I think we can make good use of these times. So but I think few ground rules. I think for any questions, you can use electronic hands. You can also type questions in the chat box. And our team and myself would be able to respond many of those. Those that are not responded, we try to cover up towards the end of this session. I would also request you to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Of course, presentation video recordings will be shared. Before, I think we're all set. We're all set actually to start our session. But before I invite Shubhendu, I would request you and to open your cameras for a quick picture. So, Anam, I think you have to be ready with this. Are you ready with this? So, yeah, if you can open your microphones now. Okay, I got a good green signal from Anam. So 133 participants as of now. Please open your cameras. Let me try to change the view. Okay, I think we can take. We don't have. I don't want to lose a lot of time. So I'll just go ahead with the agenda. I will just invite Shubhendu Biswas. To present. Shubhendu, you have the floor for the first session.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining this webinar. So I will right away move into the first session, which is about opening an account on a portal. So first thing first is obviously what is that portal that we are talking of? So you must have already seen our portal, right? So this is the testing server, and the one which we are talking of in production is GCC 2.globalcarboncouncil.com, right? This is the portal. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see, Shibinder.
Okay. Okay, right. So, I'll go right away. So there are two category of account opening that we are going to deal with at this point in time. One is the one of who have already been there in 1.0. So you had already had your account under 1.0 associated with certain projects. You could have been a focal point 1, you could have been a focal point 2, you could have been a public user, but you had your account under 1.0, which as per the transition plan might have got moved to 2.0. Then how do you go forward from that point on? That's one category. The second category are users who are new to GCC 2.0 and you would like to get started on GCC 2.0.
Shibinder,
So yeah.
people can only see your desktop. Have you
That's what
uploaded a
I'm saying.
presentation or something?
No, that's what I was thinking, that maybe the split of. Now can you see my screen?
Yeah. Now something is coming up. Yeah. The landing page for GCC. Yeah.
Yeah.
Portal is
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
So yeah. So the fact is that, as I said, so this is the landing page of the portal. So I'll first start with those users who are new to GCC 2.0. One who has not been under 1.0 would like to come to the portal to create their own account. So they would have to go to the portal. Once you open up the portal, as Amit said, where do you get your portal link? You get it from a globalcarboncouncil.com webpage on the top. You have GCC2 project portal. Once you click, you're going to come onto this page. Then you got to go to this button here, which says sign up herein. The moment you click on sign up, it's going to present to you a soft version of the account opening page. So I hope it's visible. Or you want me to make it a little quicker?
It's visible.
Maybe
it's visible.
Yeah. Okay. So first and foremost is you have got to decide what is your role in GCC 2.0. Is it focal point 1? Is it focal point 2? Is it a project supporter role, or is it a public user that you want to do? For people who are not so conversant with the terminology, focal point 1, focal point 2 and all, then there is a help button which is there on the top. This help button will help you in choosing the role. So it's a set of questions that they're going to ask you. They're going to say, are you wanting to create an account on the portal? If you say, yes, I want to create an account, the question that they would pose is, are you interested in submitting a project to GCC? If it is such that you are interested, then they will say that, do you have the authorization to be able to present all the documentation to GCC for registration and issuance process? Because you understand this portal takes care of registration as well as issuance. Finally, once the issuance is out, it goes to the transaction registry for the actual credits to be issued. So if you say, yes, I have the authorization, and then it will say register as focal point 1. So you know what role you need to play. Or for example, if you don't have that and you only have the rights to the credits, so you just want to have the ownership of the credits. There's some other guy who's doing your documentation. There's some other guy who's going to be on the portal to apply all the documents and all. You're just there to get as a rightful owner of the credits. Then it will tell you to open up, you register as a focal point 2. You might also be focal point 1 as well as the focal point 2, both of them, right? But the primary role will be focal point 1 because that is on the portal. So focal point 1 gets all the rights of uploading documents, answering questions, getting a validator on board, getting a verifier on board, interacting with GCC. So it's the focal point 1's role. So you select your role here, and you have to enter the organization that you represent. So you've got to write the name of the organization. Please note that we only allow organizations to come on board our portal and as focal point 1 or focal point 2. So you have to say, what is your organization? If it is a public user, you can be an individual. So it can be just your name that's there. Then your first name, your last name, your email ID, and the phone number in case we would like to contact you or there's some problem in the account, we need to contact you. You set your password, you reconfirm your password. After that, there is a field which says upload a proof of identification. So if you are representing an organization, you need to provide a proof of the organization's name that you provided on the top. So what can be a valid proof is given in the bottom, which says it can be a certificate of incorporation, it can be an article of association, it can be memorandum of association, it can be a business registration certificate. So any official documentation that corroborates this name of the organization herein can be uploaded. Choose the document, upload it, confirm that you're not a robot, and sign up. The moment you hit the sign up button, it will send you a mail saying that your email account, your ID has now been forwarded to GCC for approval. And we as GCC and the admin team will look at the document that you have provided, check that it's in line with the organization name that you have said. And if you find it is right, we are going to activate that account. The moment you get the account activation is done, you'll receive another email that will say your account is active. So this is the way that anyone can come on board GCC 2.0 to create their account with a role that they choose from, right? So now what happens to those people who had already had projects under 1.0 and who are now moving into 2.0? So we have, say for example, there are two categories of projects which have now been mandatorily moved under 2.0. What are those? One category of projects which under the previous project portal had been in the early phases, right? Which is like in the phase prior to GSC, start of GSC, which was in activation stage, or which had submitted for GSC but did not get completed, which had got issues raised and hasn't come back yet, who haven't completed the GSC, they have been moved to 2.0. So there, all the focal points and everything has been moved to 2.0. And the projects which are already registered have now been moved to 2.0. So if you are a project which has already got registered, or you are a project which is early on, therefore, if you take an example of any project which is therein, the moment you go to your project page, it will show on the top of the page that this is already moved to 2.0, and you cannot do anything in this project. Now, how do you tackle the problem of the account part of it and all? There is also some pointer which is already given in those in 1.0. So if you go to 1.0, it will say this project is already migrated to 2.0. And what can you do? You can then have a question mark here, and I hope you can see this question mark. If you click, it will tell you what you need to do. So it will say, go to 2.0 portal, log in with your username and password. The moment you log in, there will be a mail that will say that this is the link which you need to click to confirm your email ID. If you don't receive that link, please let us know that we are not receiving this confirmation link. We will see if there is something that is stuck at our end or somewhere at the back end. We will help you out in that. The moment you receive the link, you can click on it, your account will get authenticated. You'd have to again re-log in with your 1.0 credentials onto the portal. You will get a second link which will ask you to mandatorily change the password. So you will have to now put in a second set of passwords different from the first one to set a password for GCC 2.0 portal. And once you have set, that's it. You can then enter with your username, that's the your email ID, and the new set of passwords to enter into 2.0 portal. So very simple. Use your present credentials of 1.0 and 2.0 portal. You will receive a mail asking with a link saying, please click the link in order to activate. If you activate, you have to again log into the portal. You will receive a second link which will ask you to change your password. The moment you set your second password, you are good to go. You can then log in into 2.0 portal. If any of these two stages where you have the first one where an email confirmation, second one or the resetting of the password, if you do not get the mail coming in, just send us a mail saying we are stuck at this step, we haven't received the mail. We will check at our backend as to what has gone wrong. If there's some error kind of stuff, that is why the project you haven't received your password. It might also happen that someone is, we receive now quite a bit of people are trying to log into 2.0. There are people who, if you already, as I told you, if you already have a account on 1.0 which has now moved to 2.0, if you try to create a new account with the same email ID, system will throw up an error and say, no, this user already exists. That means you already have a project under 1.0 which has got migrated to 2.0. That's why the system is not allowing you to create a duplicate ID because this is already sitting there. So please watch out for that. So any other assistance, we are here to help. So these are the two ways that you can set up an account. As Amit said, if you go to our portal on Global Carbon Council, you will be able to also access on the manual section an account opening guide on how this whole thing, all that I said just now, is also given therein in a stepwise manner as to how you can open up your account on the new GCC 2.0 portal, or people who have already had an account on 1.0, what all needs to be done in order to be able to activate the account. So that's it for now with respect to account opening. Thank you.
Even though I think there is one question that's coming up, whether anyone can open an account. So we know we can have verifiers also connected to it. We can have experts. We are, project owners and other freelancers and stakeholders. So can you give a little bit of overview about
Yeah. So for
how that will be
example,
handled?
yeah, so there are a lot of other user accounts apart from the accounts which I showed you here, right? So there can be a user account with respect to the VBBs. There can be accounts with respect to our stakeholders who are already part of GCC and all. So these accounts are made by us, GCC, and we trigger an invite to those users to join our portal. So they don't need to, join in, create an account and come into the portal. We create the account on their behalf and we send them an invite to join the portal. For external stakeholders who are not a part of GCC, you have to create your login ID and come in. For individuals who just would like to come in as a public user or would like to be as a project supporter, because if you have an interest in a project or either in some manner or associated, you can take up the role of a public user or a project supporter and can create an ID on the portal. But you will only have a read-only access for those projects. Okay, there's another thing. We have already set up the 2.0 account, but only one project registered showed in the portal. The remaining projects under RFI stage and 1.0. Is it normal? Yeah, obviously. So what does your transition plan say? Your transition plan says, if you have already completed GSC and you are in the validation stage, ongoing validation, it's up to you to decide whether you want to continue with 1.0 or you want to migrate to 2.0. So we cannot mandatorily transfer it to 2.0. So if you are the focal point of 10 projects, out of which one project is registered, obviously you are migrated to 2.0. One project hasn't still completed GSC, you are migrated to 2.0. 8 projects which are in the validation stage or have submitted request for registration and is in the due diligence process, either with us or with the verifier back after we have given the comment, is under 1.0. If you want to move to 2.0, you have got to let us know that this project I would like to migrate to 2.0. Then only we will migrate the project with your consent to GCC 2.0.
Okay, thank you, Shubhendu, for this insightful presentation. It seems like this is working. I'm already seeing a lot of notifications that people have already been logged into the system. They are signing up and they are doing so, which is good. So with this, let me now quickly move to our next presenter, Sura Majumdar, who is going to present us about the project submission form and take us through that template and walk us through it. So, Sura, you have the floor, please. Yes, we can see your presentation.
Yeah, sorry. So, hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you all to the GCC webinar. So, as briefed by Amit sir, so as a part of these presentations, we will run you through the new PSF template to be used by the project owner under GCC 2.0. So why this? So the existing PSF template used under GCC 1.0 is updated to incorporate the requirements from introductions of additional market eligibility level like CA plus level, compliant with requirements of Article 6.2, CCP plus level, compliant with requirement of ICVCM, and C+ first phase level compliant with code share requirement for first phase. GCC 2 providing the options for renewable crediting period of 15 years in addition to the older options of fixed crediting period of 10 years only. Introducing of additional certification level like EL, EBL, so which is environmental no harm level within legal compliance and beyond legal compliance. Similarly, the social no net harm, no harm level within legal compliance and beyond legal compliance, and paving way towards digitization. So the PSF cover page is a digitalized form. So taking a note from the earlier brief, so GCC 2 PSF template is to be used by the project owner seeking registration for issuance of AREC and or ACCs. So with EL or EBL, SL or SBL levels tagged with CORSIA, C+ level for pilot and or first phase, Article 6.2 CL level and ICVCM. The PSF cover page now is to be filled digitally on the GCC project portal, and PSF main form is to be submitted in conjugations with the PSF cover page. Unlike GCC 1.0, where the instructions and the draft versions of the template was in a single as a single document, GCC 2 presents instructions for completing the PSF form as a separate documents. So please note that in additions to the instructions for completing the project submission form, project owners shall ensure compliance with project standard, environmental standard, project sustainability standard, standard for CORSIA, standard for Article 6.2, ICVCM, and others. So as is required for developing the project documents. So with these slides are intended to present the key difference between GCC 1.0 and GCC 2.0 PSF template in terms of content. So I'll give overview section wise and then run you to the format also. So the descriptions of the project activity which covered under section A of the PSF template pertaining to the descriptions of the project activity which was under section A is now to be covered under section B of the template. So additional requirement under these sections to be addressed includes identification and eligibility of the project types. Under technology measures, the project owner have to brief the existing technologies measures prior to the project implementations and confirmations on the presence of other registered projects. In addition to the requirements in the GCC 1.0 template, project owners need to describe the legal owners, the focal points, need to describe debundling, bundling, double counting, and also under double counting the registrations in another GHG or non-GHG program, double claiming. So now we'll take a look at the instruction for completing the project. So how it is difference between GCC 1 and GCC 2. So the yellow highlighted sections is common between GCC 1.0 and GCC 2.0. So the blue highlighted sections are the additional requirement under GCC 2 under each sections. So for the sections like purpose and descriptions of the project activity, the project owner additionally need to describe the purpose of the activity and measures taken. In addition to the sustainable development contributions, which was earlier needs to be explained, project owners need to describe how the project have sufficient safeguards against environmental and social risk. If the project activity is a homogeneous or heterogeneous bundle, the project owner needs to describe how the bundle project is organized. In addition, the project owner needs to provide a brief descriptions of the certification level applied to the project activities like EL or EBL, SL or SBL, market eligibility level like C+, CA+, or CCP+. Now coming to the next sections. So locations and geo coordinates. So unlike GCC 1.0, the project owner only needs to provide geo coordinates presented in decimal format up to the 4 decimal places. So if the project activity, these are some of the additional requirement now. If the project activity is a bundled project or comprises of multiple sites, confirm locations and geo coordinates of all the bundled activities. As already been done that KML file for the site locations to be prepared using suitable tool and uploaded in the GCC portal. So this is an additional features now that project owner may also use the online map tool provided in the GCC project portal for demarcating the project location. The KML file and the geo coordinates would be auto-generated on the project portal and can be replicated in the PSF main form. So this is typically a new additions to the to these sections under section B. It is the identification and eligibility of the project type. So here the project owner needs to explain how the project complies to the eligibility requirement of project type in accordance to the guidelines or requirement as specified by the project standard. In addition, if the project is providing or requiring the COSIA Article 6.2 or ICVCM level, the project owner needs to explain the eligibility of the project in accordance with the applicability requirement for the standard applied for COSIA Article 6.2 and ICVCM. So these are the details on how the things needs to be described. So technology and measures, these are the common sections, but what additionally needs to be incorporated is the informations regarding the existing technologies and measures prior to the project informations. So please provide the descriptions of the technologies and measures that were in places prior to implementations of the project activity. This is in additions to the technology and measures that are implemented under the project activity. So here a detailed descriptions is being provided that what are the particular informations that needs to be provided, which includes the types and levels of services provided by the project facilities, technical details, like install capacities, load factor, efficiency, energy and mass flow balances if required. So these are some of the additional requirements, like for the energy generation project involving multiple sites. In case of bundled project activity, submit a simplified SLD indicating how power would be exported or imported from the project boundary and the locations of the measurement instruments. So this para number 22 is critical. So describe how the technology and measures are aligned with the host country priorities and needs, referring specifically to the host country NDC. So these are some additional requirement if the project is seeking additional level, like for projects seeking COSIA level, C+ first place level, like confirm that the technology or measures are not among the exclusion category of GCC, and it may be, and the documents or the informations are available on ICAO website. So for project activities seeking Article 6.2 level, confirm that the technology measures are eligible under Article 6.2 framework of the host country. And similarly, for the project activity seeking ICVCM level, confirm that the technology or measures is eligible under GCC standard for ICVCM eligibility of the project issuance. So now coming to the informations about the legal owners. Unlike the GCC 1.0 template, where we used to, project owner used to provide informations about the project owner, here the project owner needs to provide informations about the legal owner, focal point for communication with GCC, which is focal point 1, and focal point for ownerships of ACC, known as focal point 2. So for Article 6.2 standard, if a project is seeking Article 6.2 standard leveling, then indicate the buyer country's details. For projects where approved ACC credits are to be split between 3 focal points, the details of the focal points for ownership of ACC rights shall be provided in the PSF. Confirm that the development, implementations, and operations of the project activity by the legal owner, project owner, does not or will not involve any illegal activities, including money laundering, fraud, criminal activities, etc. So unlike GCC 1.0, additional informations that needs to be provided under these sections includes debundling, not applicable for a large scale project activities, but in case small scale or a micro scale project activities, demonstrate that the project is not a debundled component of a large scale project activities. If your project is a bundle project, like an homogeneous or heterogeneous bundle, then conduct a two-level analysis to determine whether the activities within the bundles are homogeneous and heterogeneous, and provides a brief information about that. And if it is not applicable, that the project is not a bundle activity, please mark as not applicable. So this is another sections like the registration, double counting. So confirm that if whether the project activity is registered or submitted for registrations to other international, regional, national, or subnational, both GHG and non-GHG programs, including Article 6.2, Article 6.4, and also if it is registered, provide registrations and issuance details of any GHGs and non-GHG attributes to the project activity. And another aspect is double claiming of the environmental and social attributes. So confirm that the project activity is not double claiming the environmental and social attributes or including in SDG washing. So all the relevant details will be available in the project sustainability standard. Now coming to the next section. So this is the second sections of the PSF, and the most critical informations are to be embedded in these sections. So while it was section B in the GCC 1.0 template, it is to be covered under section C of the GCC 2.0 template. So additional requirement under these sections to be addressed under GCC 2.0 PSF, which is over and above the GCC 1, is the deviations from the methodologies, tools, under the descriptions of the baseline scenario, treatment of nationals and sectoral policies in determinations of the baseline scenario. For the purpose of additionality demonstrations, so these sections has been splitted under the descriptions has to be included under defined heads. So although those many of the informations were earlier produced in a broader heads of B.5, now has to be categorized under section C under the relevant subsections, subheads. So now we will run you through and specifically for ICBCM projects. So there is a requirement for uncertainty determinations and the deductions that are applicable to the project activity for the expected ACCs. So I'll just take a look at the instruction template and so as I was describing that under the reference, under the outline of the reference of the methodologies, tools, and standardized baselines, you now need to clearly indicate that the applied GCC standards. So applicability of methodologies and tools and standardized baselines is almost same as used to be as was required to be described under GCC 1.0. That is justify the choice of selected methodologies and tools where applicable, the selected standardized baselines. So this is almost same. So this is a newly added sections like deviations from the methodologies, tools, and standardized baseline. So under these sections, the PO or the project owner needs to describe on whether any deviations from the selected methodology or methodological tools that has been approved by GCC Regulatory Committee or CDM Executive Board or Supervisory Board of Article 6.4 for the proposed GCC project activity has been considered or applied. So these descriptions needs to be included under section C.3 of the PSF. So project boundary is almost same how it was to be described in GCC 1.0 needs to be described under GCC 2.0. Establishment and description of the baseline scenario is almost same as it used to be defined under GCC 1.0, needs to be defined under GCC 2.0 with an additions like there is a now dedicated subsections where the project owner needs to describe how the relevant national and sectoral policies, regulations, and circumstances are taken into account in determinations of the baseline scenario as per the relevant requirement in the project standard. So this is additions. Now coming to the additionality, as I was describing that the content is almost the same with some new additions and with some new additions of the component requirement. And now there are some subsections where the information needs to be included. So the legal requirement test provide a list of laws, regulations in the host country that are applicable to the project activity. If certain laws and regulations are not fully enforced, clearly demonstrated that they are non-enforcement as per official reliable sources. So this is a new sections, or this is a new requirement under GCC 2.0, where the project owner needs to demonstrate the prior considerations. So explain how the financial benefit from the sale of carbon credits were considered necessary in the decision to undertake the project as a proposed GCC project activity at the point of investment decisions. Financial additionality and barrier analysis needs to be described and demonstrated in accordance to requirement of the methodology and the applied tools. So, however, the requirement in describing the additionality, so the PO needs to be very particular about providing the informations in terms of event and actions considered as the investment decisions and why the same was considered as the investment decision date, like reference of the input values used for investment analysis. For A2, so these are the things where which was a part of verifier's assessment now needs to be also included for A2 and A3 type project. Supplementary data on the actual cost and expenses shall be included in the PSF and on investment analysis spreadsheet to demonstrate the robustness of the assumptions used in the investment analysis. Common practice analysis has to be carried out as is required by the tools. So other additionality requirement, this is very particular to the Article 6.2. So what the instruction reads out that this may include details such as compliance with the additionality requirement under Article 6.2 cooperative approach. Now estimations of emissions reductions and deductions. So as per the estimations of emissions reductions is concerned, it is almost the same as was required under GCC 1.0. Now coming to the difference is only from the deduction side. So just one more point that if for a renewable energy generation project seeking AREC during the issuance stage, present the year-on-year net power generation estimates in a table. Now coming to the uncertainty determination, this is a new requirement for the projects applying ICVCM CCP level. If the project activity is seeking ICVCM or CCP level, undertake and report uncertainty analysis as per the requirement, relevant requirements and applied methodologies and tools. So deductions, list out all the emissions reduction deductions as per the requirement and applicability for corresponding adjustment, adaptation fund of UNFCCC, contributions to the overall mitigations of global emissions, host country SOP reserve account. So it will be based on the requirement that what deductions needs to be applied under each project activity. For the monitoring plan, it's almost the same, unlike the GCC 1 templates, where you need to provide the descriptions of the parameters to be monitored, including the environmental and social safeguard standard, the project sustainability standard. So data and parameters that needs to be monitored is exposed. So the current instructions provide a detailed information checklist that what informations needs to be provided and how the informations needs to be complied with the requirements of GCC. So this provides para 94 and sub-paras provide the details of the same. So monitoring parameters for environmental and social no harm. So describe the monitoring. So details of this will be covered under the next presentations by my colleague. So under these sections, describe the monitoring parameter that needs to be monitored to confirm the project activities does not cause environmental or social harm. Same with monitoring parameter for SDG. Describe the monitoring parameter that needs to be monitored to confirm that the project activity contributes to the UN SDGs. Sampling requirement, it is same as per the GCC 1. And over here, that the roles and responsibilities for implementing the monitoring plan needs to be clearly defined. So now coming to the subsequent slides of the project start date and the crediting period. So the PSF sections on the start date, which earlier needs to be described under section C of the PSF, now needs to be described under section D. And the additional requirement is only one, that is the type of crediting period needs to be described, like whether it's a fixed crediting period or a renewable crediting period. Section D, now coming to the section, PSF sections on environmental and social impact assessment as per the host country requirement, which was earlier a part of section D descriptions in the PSF, now to be covered under section E. But in these sections, there are some additional requirements to be described, and I'll just let you go through the instructions. So the first section is compliance with the applicable legal and regulatory requirement. Here, the PO needs to provide the list of applicable environmental and social laws and regulations of the host country that are applicable to the project activity, provide information on how the project activity complies with the applicable environmental and social laws, confirm if the applicable environmental and social laws and regulations require project owner to undertake the environmental and social impact assessment, confirm if ESIA of the project activity is carried out to comply with the financing requirement led by the domestic or international financing institutions, or EIA is conducted voluntarily by the project owners. So this is a new sets of requirement under the GCC 2.0 PSF template. So the second is E.2, where you have to describe where the project owner have to describe the summary of the environmental and social impact assessment conducted by the project owner and the proposed management plan. So section F, which is largely the environmental and social safeguards and no net harm assessment. So it will be covered in the next presentations where detailed descriptions will be provided. But as far as the PSF is concerned, so the templates or the forms that were earlier present under section E.1 and E.2 of the PSF template under GCC 1.0 is now has to be replaced by a summary. So provide on the PO has only to provide a summary of the outcome of the environment no harm assessment in the PSF, including the applied certification level, like whether it is EL or EBL, whether it is beyond environmental compliance requirement or within. So here it is, if it is a homogeneous, it is a heterogeneous project. Similarly, they summarize the result for all bundle activities in the PSF and explain how the level is assigned to the project activities. The detailed descriptions of filling out the forms will be covered under the next round. So I'm not going through. Similarly, under the social safeguards, if the project is activities are heterogeneous, provide a summary of the outcome of the social no harm assessment in the PSF, including the applied certification level in these sections, and the rest of the details has to be covered in a separate forms. So same with the impact on UN SDGs. So summarize the outcomes of the assessment of SDG impact in the PSF, including the applied SDG certifications level. So now coming to the requirement of the local stakeholders consultations. So the local stakeholders consultations requirement has a revamping based on the requirement of the additional market eligibility level and the certifications level. So here, under the GCC 2.0 template, the PO has to additionally describe the grievance mechanisms and its redressal process, ongoing communications for continual stakeholders engagement, FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent, benefit sharing, public comments received during GSC. So what I'll do, I will quickly go through the, sorry. So I'll quickly go through the instructions. So what is required under the local stakeholders consultations. So over here, although the scopes were earlier also to be covered, but now under the scope, the PO needs to clearly elaborate the minimum groups of stakeholders that were required to involved and how they were identified, particularly in respect of IPLCs, that is indigenous populations and local communities of the region. How the FPIC, how the informations regarding the FPIC benefit sharing has been made available to the stakeholders over and above the requirement, over and above the informations pertaining to the environmental and social impacts of the projects that were required earlier under GCC 1.0. In addition, the PSF needs to detail out the stakeholders consultation details like location, dates, breakup of stakeholders participated based on the genders and how individual participated in LSC, local stakeholders consultations can be segregated based on IPLCs. So these are the particular informations now needs to be covered under the PSF. So provide evidence. So the PO has to provide evidence that invitations were sent to relevant stakeholders and their comments were invited. If any relevant stakeholders were not invited, provide an appropriate justifications. So under the section considerations for the comments received during LSC as was required under GCC 1.0, in addition to that, GCC 2.0 will require the PO to describe how the comments were addressed by the project owners and how remedial actions to be taken during the project implementations and operations will be monitored and demonstrated during the X verifications of the project activity. So as articulated, so these are the new sections like grievance mechanisms and redressal process. Explain how the grievance mechanisms and redressal process related to the requirements in the project standard, environmental standard, sustainability standard are being taken care of, has to clearly demonstrated the ongoing communications for continual stakeholders engagement. So the PO needs to describe the process and actions taken towards active and continual engagement with the stakeholders. If the project is applying for ICVCM CCP level, demonstrate the compliance with the FPIC requirement as per the standard for ICVCM. Benefit sharing, if the project activity is applying for ICVCM CCP plus level, demonstrate the compliance with the benefit sharing requirements. And additionally, the public comments received during the GSCs needs to be incorporated in the PSF. So now the next sections. So it is regarding the app. Sir.
Yeah, so can be a little quicker now.
Yeah, so it's almost at the end of the session, sir. So the PSF template sessions age, and so the authorizations needs to be outlined. And the last is the appendix sections where additional informations like contact information of the focal point 1, post-registration changes if required, ICVCM eligibility and port share eligibility and Article 6 point eligibility needs to be demonstrated. So this is in a nutshell what needs to be additionally covered under GCC 2.0 PSF template. With this, I end my presentations, and if there's any query, we will be responding to that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Surya, for this detailed presentation. So, because the presentations are huge, completely, the next presentation will all take a bit of time. So I would like to break for 5 minutes to allow you the possibility to ask questions now. I've seen that there are a few questions that come to the chat box. Many of them we have responded. but there are still some that are still open. So first, if you want to ask questions, you can ask directly by raising electronic hand, and then we can monitor it and we can give you the floor, please. So if you have any questions, ask it now. So in general, I would say that there is the major difference between the previous PSF and the new PSF. The major difference is depending on the new labels. Corsia phase 2 requirements, when they come up, then we know that there is an additional requirement for host country letter of authorization. And there is an additional information required on how the corresponding adjustment would be applied, because Corsia wants very clear-cut information on how the corresponding adjustment had to be applied. So GCC provides opportunity to have 15% buffer deduction, and then any risk for the corresponding adjustment will be taken care of. So this is the major difference. Similarly, for Article 6.2, a letter of authorization, as well as host country letter of authorization, as well as you also need the information on how the corresponding adjustment would be done. Apart from this, with regard to ICBCM, there is new information, particularly with regard to investment analysis, that you need to provide how the carbon finance has actually helped to overcome the barriers. So you need to provide that information if you want to apply for ICBCM. So the key thing is basically you first have to decide as a project developer what are the labels that you want to target. If you want to only target vanilla ACCs, then the information that's given in the first PSF and in 1.0 should be good enough, right? Of course, you have to present it in a new format, but I think it will be just copy and pasting information at the right places. However, if you want that, okay, I also need to apply for Corsia phase 1, then there is a standard on this separately available. You need to comply with that. So as I explained, I don't want to repeat again. There are few requirements that needs to be done. With regard to host country letter of authorization as well as corresponding adjustment. Now, if you want to apply ICBCM, then obviously this is one requirement. There are other requirements of ICBCM. I don't want to go into details. Sura has already covered FPIC, first prior informed consent, benefit sharing. And then you also need to look at adaptation, which is a voluntary thing. You have to choose if you want to do that. Because, see, the first thing to do is you need to think about what is the jurisdiction you want to target your credits when they are realized. Is it only ICBCM? Is it only Corsia phase 1? Is it only Corsia pilot phase? Or is it Article 6.2? Now, depending on your crediting period, if you have a 10-year crediting period, then let's say 10-year crediting period starting 2019, then for the year 2019, you can apply for Corsia, right? Only Corsia phase, pilot phase. If you from 2021 to 2026, if you can get letter of authorization and if you can handle corresponding adjustments, of course, then you can apply for Corsia phase 1. And for the remaining crediting period, you can apply for Article 6.2 or vanilla ACCs. So I think this is the first thing you need to first decide. All right. Based on this, then only you can modify the documentation. Okay, so there were also I don't know if there are any electronic hands. I'm not monitoring it, but Joseph, if you can monitor it, or Shubindu, if you can monitor it, you can let me know. But there were also few questions which I want to address in the chat box because they were quite repetitive. Where to find the information? Where are these guidelines? Where are these templates? They're all available on your website. I showed you earlier. If you go to GCC 2.0, let me quickly try to show it to you, because there are many questions on actually on this very thing. So GCC 2.0, if you go to GCC, you'll find this somewhat landing page, and you can go to resource center. If you click resource center, you will find this GCC 2.0, and you have all the documents here. You can see program framework, you can manual. There are multiple documents that are here. And apart from this, you can see procedural documents. You can see templates and forms. All the templates that were shown are here. You also have information documents where I talked about the manuals. They are the ones that are used to navigate through the projects portal. So they will give you step-by-step information. Shubindu showed some of you already. So I think this is it basically, why the information is. So now let me go back and let me try to see if there are any other questions or any electronic hands are raised. I don't see any electronic hand raised by anyone. So
All the questions have been answered in the chat box. You can just
Chat
refer
box,
to
but
it.
I'm not very sure whether they can raise the electronic hand, whether it's been activated. Anna was to confirm. But if not, they can put it in the chat. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And all there are a few
just
on
let's know.
PRCs. I will address
People
during the
can raise.
PRC one.
Kareem, yes, I think I saw Kareem has, I think Kareem probably raised hand, but it just vanished away. Okay. So in the meantime, because we have limited time, I would now like to go
No, what
to
I'll
the
do,
next
I'll allow him.
next session.
Yeah. No, I am allowing Kareem to speak. Kareem, you can speak. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Yep, thank you very much. I was just trying it actually, but thank you.
So you have any questions?
Oh,
You're
no
just
questions from
testing
my
it.
end. Yes,
Okay, it's
exactly.
okay. Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay. And then I think we have limited time, so I would like to now move to the next part of the presentation. Mayank Kumar is here with us. So he's going to talk more about no harm requirements on environmental and social, but also about the SDGs. So Mayank, you have the floor, please. I can see your presentation already on the screen.
Thank you, Amit. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you. Yeah, I can see your
Okay.
slides. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is over next 30 minutes or so, what I want to talk about is the practical application of the Environmental and Social Safeguard Standard version 4 and application of the Project Sustainability Standard version 4. Both of these standards in their latest version are applicable under GCC 2.0, which means if you are filling up the PSF template, so you would need to rely on these standards. You can't go on the previous version of the standards under GCC 2.0. I think Subro has briefly touched upon the sections wherein there is additional guidance on how you answer questions within the PSF. But I think the holistic guidance and the procedures and the requirements and rules is everything in these standards. So whenever you fill up those portion of the PSF template, you need to refer to these standards. In this particular presentation on both of these standards, what I want to touch upon is some of the key technical and procedural requirements that will be helpful to you when you design the project activity under GCC and you write the PSF. I will also briefly touch upon how to fill up the environmental and social impact assessment form and the SDG assessment form. We have talked on numerous occasions that from now on, the impact assessment on social and environmental aspects and on SDG has to be done in separate Excel forms. And then lastly, brief guidance on your pathway to assessment of social, environmental, and SDG impacts and how you report the outcomes of these impacts assessment to GCC. So let's get started on the first part, which is assessing the environmental and social risks and impacts of projects under GCC 2.0. We had one webinar wherein we briefly touched upon what are the differences between the latest version of the standard under GCC 2.0 and the previous version. I'm not going to spend time on comparing, but I want to quickly highlight the key rules and key differences that are there in the latest version compared to the previous standard. So the latest version of the environmental and social safeguards standard applies to scope 1 to 13 and sectoral scope 16, which is CCS. The requirements are not there for sector scope 14 and 15, which is agriculture and AFLU. This is work in progress. So we may come up with a different standard for these sectors, or we may include rules within the same standard. So a new version of the standard may come up having rules for AFLU and agriculture as well. The standard in its present version, the latest version, is applicable for CORSIA, market eligibility, Article 6.2, ICVCM, and voluntary carbon market. In other words, if you are not seeking any of these market eligibility, only seeking GCC credits. In terms of approach, and this is, I think, is the key difference which we need to understand, that in this version, the latest version of the standard, we are not asking you to do an impact evaluation per se of the environmental and social aspects of the project activity. Rather, we want you to take a risk-centric approach. And by risk, we simply mean that wherein you identify that there are certain hazards or certain aspects of the project activity which can lead to negative impacts compared to the situation prior to the implementation of the project activity, then you need to evaluate those risks, describe what are the mitigation measures, and then monitor them ex post to demonstrate that the risks are being controlled, not being materialized during the implementation of the project activity, and hence we can claim that the project activity does not do any harm to the environment or to the society. So which means that in the version 4, you only need to consider the negative impacts. There is no need to consider the positive impacts. In the earlier version of the standard, the labels that we were awarding were E+ and S+ label, but now we have moved to two different labels. So EL and SL label, these imply compliance with the legal requirements on the environment part. On the social part, SL implies compliance with the legal social requirements, but then there are also some mandatory social rights which are there in Appendix 1 of the standard, which I will show you in a bit. So you have to comply to those as well. So EL is purely legal, SL is legal social requirements plus the mandatory social requirements within the standard. And EBL and SBL denotes beyond legal. So these are the enhanced label. EL and SL labels are mandatory for you. So you apply any of these market labels, including just purely vanilla GCC credits, you have to demonstrate compliance with legal, environmental, and social requirements. So these labels are mandatory. These labels are something which, if you want to claim, you can go for it. There is no mandatory rules from GCC to use to claim EBL and SBL labels. Then there are some comprehensive rules on the stakeholder engagement. So previously there were brief guidance within the PSF template, within the project standard, but now there are, if you open the standard, you would see explicit rules on the continual stakeholder engagement, starting from consideration of, identifying the relevant stakeholders, making them the part of your project design, presenting your environmental and social assessment to them, see if there are certain concerns which are not yet captured, capture these within the environmental and social impact assessments. And then post implementation of the project activity during operations, if there are certain grievances, certain complaints, you also need to consider them in your assessment and address them. And of course, report them during the verifications as well. There are also provisions on the post registration changes and renewal of crediting period, which may not be relevant at this stage, but then may be handy maybe in the future. Then there is assessment and performance monitoring. So as I said earlier, the entire assessment was in PSF and PMR. It was, sometimes it can go into pages because of the structure of the tables. So to sort of, remove all those hurdles, we have moved it to Excel. You can use the Excel template to assess, to do the environmental and social impact assessment and upload those templates along with your PSF for assessment by the validator, verifier, and for assessment by GCC. Once you complete the Excel-based form, you would also have certain performance monitoring plan at the end of the assessment in the Excel form. So you can simply capture those results and put up the monitoring parameters in the PSF and the PMR. And then lastly, the validators and verifiers life will also become easy with the Excel-based templates because they don't have to provide any information within the validation report. The Excel file which the project owners have submitted, for each parameter, they can provide their opinion within the Excel file. Now, moving on to the technical aspects, which is the environmental and social and impact assessment process. Well, if you read the standard, I understand that if you apply it for the first time, you might get lost. So that's why the objective here is to tell you that you may find a lot of rules and paragraphs within the standard, but if you sum everything up, this is all what we are looking for, and it's not too difficult to understand. And let me make it easy for you. So you start with identifying the negative risks and impacts. So as I mentioned that there is no need to identify the positive impacts. You only identify the risks and negative impacts. What are the risks and negative impacts? Things which are going in the negative direction compared to the situation prior to the project activity. Okay, so for example, if your project activity is a renewable project activity, you are reducing GHG emissions, that's a positive impact, please do not consider that under this version of the standard. You're putting up a solar power project activity, and this can lead to, let's say, dumping of the waste batteries, which can lead to environmental pollution, soil pollution. That is a negative risk. That is a hazard. You consider that under this version of the standard. So you identify all these environmental and social risks. Next step is you identify what are the legal requirements, legal and regulatory requirements within the host party where the project activity is implemented. If in certain situations, in certain cases, if there are no legal and regulatory requirements, and let's say if you are applying for EBL or SBL label, then you can also refer to the international best practices. So for example, on health, you can refer to guidelines from WHO. On labor, you can refer to the latest guidelines by International Labor Organization. On environment, you can refer to UNEP guidelines. There are, good international institutions, who have published good authentic guidelines on different environmental and social aspects. You can always refer to these. And we have kept it open, so we haven't restricted. We will not question if you use one, not other. But if you use the best international practices, that should be fine with us. And then you can also set up voluntary limits, which are stringent to the international best practices or at par with the international best practices. You can specify these guidelines. Next thing that you have to do is something called as do no harm assessment. And here the logic is very simple. What you have to do is you have to assess the environmental and social negative impacts against the legal or regulatory limits or the voluntary international best practices. If the negative impacts crosses these limits, then it's harmful. If it doesn't, then it's harmless. That's all. That's all you have to do under do no harm risk assessment. And I will again tell you more about this in the environmental and social assessment form. Once you have identified that a risk can be harmful, what are the mitigation measures that you are putting up to bring the risk within acceptable limits? Now, acceptable limits could be the legal regulatory limits if there are laws and regulations on the particular social and environmental aspect within the host country. If not, then acceptable limits could be the international best practices or the voluntary limits. And once with the mitigation measures, you have brought the risk within acceptable limits, then we need to also ensure that what you are claiming in the PSF is being achieved, exposed during verification, during operation of the project activity. So that's why we ask you to come up with a performance monitoring plan, wherein you would put up the indicators, wherein you would put up how you're going to monitor the information of the measuring device, and so on, to ensure that there is no harm exposed during implementation and operation of the project activity. So this part, the first three parts of the environmental risk assessment is the risk assessment, and these two parts is the risk management. At this stage, I also wanted to highlight that different voluntary standards have come up with different, environmental and social risk assessment. Now there is also sustainable development tool coming from Article 6.4. Now, of course, we are different programs, so the way the rules are being drafted may look different. But if you look at the fundamental level, what GCC is doing and perhaps what Article 6.4 has published is more or less the same. So Article 6.4 has also published one template wherein you do the risk assessment and another template wherein you do the risk management. So things perfectly align across different standards as well, in my opinion. Now, guidance on do no harm risk assessment. So as I said, once you have identified that there are certain risks which can create negative impact on the environment and society, if yes, then you identify are there any legal or regulatory limits in the host country? If no, then if yes, then you see whether the impact that is being created is within the environmental, within the legal and regulatory thresholds. If yes, then are you monitoring that? If yes, then you can claim it as harmless and give it a score of 0. So when you're going by legal, legal aspects, you are primarily either just applying for EL/SL labels. It might also be possible you might be applying for EL/BL label. Okay, in which case you will automatically receive EL/BL label if you comply with the legal requirements. So compliance with the legal requirement doesn't create any net positive harm, net positive impact on the environment and society. So that's why we give a score of 0. But in case, let's say there is no legal requirement and you are, let's say, also assessing certain aspects or going beyond the legal limits, then Do you comply with the environmental and social best practice? If yes, is it being monitored? Yes, then you give it a score of +1, call it harmless. If no, you give it a score of -1 and call it harmful. Now, also remember, there are certain things which you need to be careful of, and one among them is, if there are certain legal and regulatory thresholds and you do not comply to them which means that even for one environmental and social aspect, if the compliance is not demonstrated during registration, let's say, or exposed during issuance, there will be no registration and issuance of ACCs. Similarly, if, let's say, in the PSF you say that there are legal and regulatory limits, we comply with the legal limits, but during verification you cannot demonstrate that the compliance is being ensured, which means you have complied with the legal limits during the monitoring period. For that particular monitoring period, there won't be any issuance of ACCs. Does this affect issuance of ACCs in the future monitoring period? The answer is no. So it doesn't affect. So if in monitoring period 1, there are certain legal issues, you can't demonstrate no issuance, but for the second monitoring period, you can apply for issuance. Now at this stage, let me open the Excel-based form on how you practically put up information on the environmental and social assessment. So when you go to the environmental and social safeguards form, which is on the GCC portal already, so you can download it. The first tab is the guidance to fill the form. So there are very brief guidance on what steps you're going to take to fill up this form. And this simply is telling you that, step 1 is go to the environmental impact assessment sheet. So let's go to the environmental impact assessment sheet. So this is the environmental impact assessment sheet. Now the environmental social risk assessment process, which I've showed you in a slide, is being sort of translated here in the form of a Excel sheet or a template wherein you can do the real assessment. Now here, what we have done, we have listed some of the environmental hazards or risks. We have categorized them by air and climate, for example, land, water, air. If you compare this with Article 6.4, Article 6.4 is calling these elements. We are not giving it some additional names, so these are listed. And within each of these categories, there are different hazards that are being listed. Can you add another category? The answer is yes, you may. Can you add more hazards or more risks? Yes. So you would find that for each category, there are additional rows that you can add. So which means there are certain aspects which is not relevant to the project activity, you can say not applicable. Something that is applicable to the project activity, you can put in this Excel file. Once you have identified the negative impacts or risks or hazards, you identify what are the causes of the hazard. Okay, what could be the possible causes of hazard? So for example, let's say if it's a carbon capture project and you say that CO2 emissions is a hazard, what could be the possible cause? The possible cause could be leakage during the transportation of CO2 through the pipeline. So that is the possible cause of the hazard. Then if that happens, what is the negative impact? So if the CO2 leaks, then it could basically saturate the environment. It could have impact on the human life and the biodiversity and so on. So all these negative impacts have to be listed here. Now, what are the inherent safeguards in the inherent safeguards within the design of the project activity? So inherent safeguards are always there when you put up a project activity, when you put up a system. So you describe that. You describe what are the legal and regulatory limits, laws in the host country. Within those laws, what are the limits? And then you compare the impact that you see from the project activity with the legal limits, and you conclude the risk assessment, do no harm risk assessment. So whether it is harmful or harmless. If it's harmless, then it's fine. You can give it a score of +1. If it's beyond legal, if it's legal, you give it a score of 0. If the aspect is harmful, then you apply certain mitigation measures to bring this within the legal regulatory limits or international best practices. And then if after implementation of the mitigation measure, it becomes harmless, you give it a score of +1, and then you sort of move on to the next part. So similarly, environmental impact assessment, you fill up the similar information for social impact assessment. You would also see that for social impact assessment, there are different categories such as human and labor rights, health and safety, rights of indigenous people and local people, cultural heritage, and you can add other categories, or you can simply add different risks within these categories. Something that is not applicable, you can mark not applicable. The logic and flow of assessment remains the same. Once the project owner has completed until column J, the environmental and social risk assessment, they can submit this file to the verifier, and the verifier or the validator can put up their comment. How have they confirmed that what project owner is claiming is actually being implemented and is being correct? They can simply mark their comment within the Excel file. So no need to put up a separate opinions in your validation and verification report. Once you have completed this assessment, the next thing that you have to do is you have to go to the no harm scoring table. So I can show you, let's go back to the presentation. So you see that in GCC 1.0, there was only E plus and S plus label. But in GCC 2.0, there is EL, SL, and EBL and SBL label, right? And there are different rules as to when you can claim these particular labels. So let's say as a project owner, you design the project activity and target EL and SL label, which means you only want to comply with the legal and mandatory environmental and social rights. So which means that you have to, for each and every negative environmental and social aspect, you would do the assessment, and you should arrive at a score of 0, because in legal you're not getting +1. So ideally, if you sum up all the scores, you get the final score as 0, then you can achieve EL and SL label. Okay, ex post, provided you are monitoring, and this also happens during the verification as well. If you're claiming EL and SL label, but you are not able to demonstrate compliance with the legal and mandatory requirements ex ante or ex post, then there is no registration and issuance of ACCs. Similarly, if you are applying for enhanced labels, and if the environmental no harm score is 0, greater than, equal to or greater than 0, then you can claim for EL and SBL label. If it's less than 0, then you are not eligible to receive enhanced labels, but you can opt for EL and SL label. So this applies during registration as well. For example, during registration, you target BL labels, enhanced labels, but you get comments, certain comments from verifier, from validator, from GCC. You can, and while addressing those comments, you realize that it's not possible for you to go for enhanced labels. You can reduce it to SL, EL, and SL labels. This thing can also apply during verification. So let's say in the PSF, you say that you want to go for enhanced labels. You can't demonstrate during verification. Minimal, you can go for the legal labels as well. So here in the Excel file, you can put up the final no harm score for environmental and social aspect, and then you can conclude whether the project activity causes harm to the project, to the environment and society or not. And then lastly, when you have completed the assessment, this is the performance monitoring plan sheet, where you can list down the indicators against each and every negative social and environmental aspects, and you're gonna detail on how you're gonna monitor these impacts ex post, and the verifier will provide information on how the performance monitoring information is accurate and complete and complies with the GCC requirements. Okay, so this is about the environmental and social aspect. There are certain additional rules in GCC 2.0, and few of these rules are on the bundle projects. So let's say if you've got a bundle project, and in the bundle project, it might very well be possible that, let's say it's a heterogeneous bundle. You are submitting to us a wind and solar hybrid project, wherein you create one bundle for wind activities, you create another bundle for solar activities. Let's say the wind project activity has got wind bundle, let's say, has got 2 activities, solar has got 2 activities. Then what you can do is within the Excel form, if these are homogeneous bundle, you can have one sheet for wind project activity environment, and you can copy and create another sheet for the solar activity. Similarly, for social, you can have one impact assessment sheet for the wind projects, and you can copy and create another sheet for the solar project activity. And the no harm scoring sheet would be then for bundle for wind and then for solar. So 2 sheets, and the performance monitoring plan will be 1. So we request that we have one performance monitoring plan. But to distinguish monitoring parameters by bundle, you can do is you can insert another column and then specify for which bundle which monitoring parameter applies. Okay, Oh, bundle, remember that the similar rules as we have gotten on SDGs in GCC 1.0 applies on bundle as well. That let's say if one of the activity in a bundle is being not able to demonstrate compliance with the legal requirements, then the entire project activity will not receive EL/SN label and will not be eligible for registration or issuance. And if one project activity applies, one bundle receives EBL label, other bundle receives EL label. So the lowest of these labels will be awarded to the project activity, which means in this case, the legal labels will be awarded to the entire project activity. And denials of labels during the monitoring period will not impact having these labels in the future monitoring periods. There are certain rules on the continuous stakeholder engagement as well. And I think the key things are that you need to take concerns and opinions of the local stakeholders in designing and implementing the environmental and social impact assessment, both during the design phase of the project activity, but also during during the implementation phase of the project activity, which means that there has to be a to and fro communication between the project owners, the operator of the site, and the local stakeholders. Okay. And to do so, definitely you would need to have certain procedures which talks about the stakeholder engagement, the communication going from the project owners to the stakeholders, and also a grievance address procedure to address the grievance to first of all take the grievance of the stakeholders and then address them during the project lifetime. And this procedure can be a separate formal procedure that you put up at site. Just like you've got many other procedures to comply with different environmental, social, and management standards, or you can simply design this procedure and have it a part of your PSF. That should suffice as well. And you have to keep records of all these communication between the stakeholders and project owners for ex post verification during the monitoring periods. Summarizing this presentation, so as a project owner, if you want to go for environmental impact assessment, the first thing that you should do is identify whether you want to go for the legal labels or you want to go for the enhanced labels. Because if you want to go for the legal labels, you only want to identify the legal environmental and social aspects which are required by law. If you want to go for enhanced labels, then you need to also identify other environmental and social aspects which are very relevant in context of the project activities, which are relevant in context of the scope of the project activities, and for which there are sufficient guidelines in the international standards. Or as a corporate, responsible corporate, there can be voluntary standards which you want to comply to. It can be compliance with the voluntary standards as well. So choose whether you want to go for legal labels or enhanced labels, and then accordingly the whole assessment has to be drafted. You conduct the risk and impact assessment in the Excel file. You report the results. By results, I mean what you have achieved. Is it the EL label or the BL label? That conclusion has to come in the PSF. Do not paste all the tables in the PSF and PMR. That is not needed. But what you need to put in the PSF and PMR is the monitoring parameters, because we want that monitoring details about the project activity for the GHG part, for the environmental and social, and for the SDG to stay in one file for the ease of reporting and assessment at validators and verifier and our end. So the monitoring parameters have to go in the PSF and the PMR. And the reporting on the outcomes of the stakeholder engagement procedures and the grievances, they also have to come up in the stakeholder section of the PSF and PMR. Okay, so lastly, there are certain projects which are transitioning from GCC 1.0 to GCC 2.0. And there are certain questions that once we transition, what do we do? So a plain and simple answer is that the rules of the standard under GCC 2.0, which means the present version of the standard, applies in entirety, which means there are no concession for projects transition to 2.0. You still have to comply with all the requirements of version 4 of the environmental and social safeguards standard. But since you have already done the environmental and social impact assessments, let's say in the already registered project activity, you have done the E+S+ assessment, wherein you have identified both the positive and negative aspects. So this is one of the registered project activity. As an example, we have taken the tables which are there in the PSF. And what I want to show you is that, for example, if you do the environmental no harm assessment for of a registered project activity willing to transition to GCC 2.0. So in the registered PSF, you say that project is expected to reduce GHG emissions. Okay. But this is a positive aspect. This is a positive impact. We do not require this under the present version of the standard under GCC 2.0. So you do not need to include this in the Excel file in the assessment form. While there are certain negative impacts such as waste oil coming from transformer, which could have impact on the soil quality and so on. This is a negative aspect. This is a risk. And if there are certain laws and regulations with regard to this aspect, you have to include this in the environmental and social impact assessment form. Similarly, on social part, let's say you say that the project activity creates long-term jobs. That's a positive aspect. We are looking for risks and negative impacts under the safeguards standard. These are not required to be covered in the environmental and social impact assessment form. While there are certain negative things such as occupational hazards that can occur during the operation of the project activity, and if there are laws and regulations, these can be covered under SL part. If there are certain things such as threatened livelihood of local population because of the implementation of the project activity, which are not covered by law, these can be covered under SBL. And the scoring then has to be done as per GCC 2.0, not as per the previous standard. Okay, so this is it about environmental and social standards. And now let's move to the SDG part.
Mike, I think we are running out of time. So
okay,
just
I think let me take 10 more minutes to this because the nature of assessment is same across these two, right?
Yeah, I think if you can do it quite quickly because the nature is same. Yeah, you understand.
Right. So I think if we have understood how things go under GCC 2.0 and environmental and social safeguard standards, here the nature of assessment and the guidelines and the way things are structured are exactly the same. No difference. In GCC 2.0, we are asking you to do assessment using the SDG plus form. You do not have to do assessment in the PSF or PMR. No reporting has to be done in the validation and verification report. Just specify the conclusions in these forms. One of the things that is different, which I want to highlight, in fact, two things. One is that this form is applicable for all sectoral scopes. Okay. Unlike ES, so which means if there are projects in forestry, they can also apply this standard. Two is the approach is a bit different under GCC 2.0. So earlier we were asking you to first identify the UN SDGs and then see which project impact sort of aligns with the UN SDGs. Now we think the better structured approach to do the SDG assessment is that you identify the impacts which you are already doing. For example, when you do the environmental and social impact assessment, so you already know what are the impacts of the project activity, and then you find that to which SDGs does this project impacts align with. So the order is sort of reversed. There are certain definitions on what could be an SDG, what can't be, which impact cannot be SDG impact under GCC 2.0 standard. So you can refer to these guidelines within the standard. But one of the important things is to note is that an impact which is recurring and lasting for the project lifetime can be qualified as SDG impact. So for example, in the earlier versions, we used to receive positive impact during construction, which is one-off. That can't be qualified as SDG impact under GCC 2.0. The process of assessing SDG contribution again is simple. What we are asking you to identify something called as the outputs and outcomes and impact of the project activity. Let me take 2 minutes to explain this because this can be a bit tricky. So in the standard, you see that we have introduced something called theory of change. Even though this is not mandatory, I repeat, applying theory of change is not mandatory. But if you look standard from any other voluntary standard, voluntary carbon standard, or any other program or project that deals on the impact side, this concept will come. It has got many different names. Some call it impact pathway, some call it result change, some call it theory of change. Idea is basically to map your inputs with the final impact. Okay. So the impact that you would have from the project activity will always align with your SDGs. And the UN SDG list that you see, the impacts are always more or less qualitative in nature. But how do you monitor the impact? You monitor the impact using through certain indicators, and indicators are more quantitative in nature. So, for example, let's say there is a solar power project activity. So the solar power project activity, the output that it would produce, it's, let's say, clean energy. Okay. And the clean energy, the outcome of the clean energy would be perhaps that, let's say it's a community-based project activity, then it could be affordable electricity, clean electricity to the households, reduce CO2. These are the short-term and medium-term impacts, outcomes of the project activity. And you would track these outcomes to demonstrate whether the project activity contributes to SDGs or not. This is a more structured approach to identify the outcomes and the impact of the project activity. But as I said, this concept is not mandatory. It is recommended. If you want to go use other concepts or want to directly identify the impacts of the project activity, that is fine with us as well. So you identify the outputs, outcome and impact of the project activity. You understand if there are any legal requirements to meet particular impacts. So if it's a legal requirement, it can't be a voluntary contribution to SDG and you can't claim that SDG. You identify the sustainability pillars, so whether you are contributing to economic or social or environmental, and which are the stakeholders that are identified. You identify the SDG priorities of the host country. So SDG as a concept is for countries to implement because countries have committed to UN under the SDG framework. So at the end of the day, you want to contribute towards the efforts of the host country and things that are important for your stakeholders. So you identify the priorities of the host country, but it's not mandatory that you always align with the priority. There is something that you are doing which contributes to any SDG, but which is not a priority of host country. That is fine. Please add that in your SDG assessment, and that will be considered. That is allowed. Once you have identified this, you identify which are the SDG targets and indicators that you are impacting, and then what is your project activities indicator which aligns with the SDG target. So your project level indicator could be the SDG, UN SDG target or indicator, or you can align an indicator which sort of aligns with SDG, UN SDG target and indicator. So for example, UN SDG 8. UN SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth. There is an indicator which talks about increased income of of users, for example. Here, the indicator that you can have is the average income that you generate from the project activity, or the indicator could also be something like number of additional jobs that you have created in the project activity, and that can also align with the SDG. Please note the project level indicator do not always have to align with the SDG targets and indicator. It can also align with the broader SDG impact goal. So once you have got that indicator, so what is the impact in the baseline? What is the impact in the project activity? And then you calculate the net SDG impact. And then you create a monitoring plan to report the SDG contributions during the registration and during the issuance of the project activity. Please note the negative impacts are being covered in the environmental and social safeguards. So there is no need to include the negative aspects here. You only have to include the positive contributions when you talk about the SDG contributions. So if you quickly go to the form, the flow of the form and the guidance is more or less the same. So here I'm showing you a filled form which we may publish sooner or later. So wherein you see that how for a solar project activity you can identify the outcomes and impacts, and then how you can identify the positive sustainable development contribution to the project activity, what could be the baseline, which sustainability pillar you are impacting environment, social, or economy. What could be, is there any law? Is it required by law or not? If there is a law, then what is the law? And then you explain the host country priorities. It could be in the strategy of the host country or other document. You specify that, and then you identify the indicators at the baseline and the project level, and then you calculate the net SDG impact. And the validator verifier can provide opinion within the same form. And then we have got a sheet wherein you put up the monitoring plan to monitor things ex post, and then you specify the label that you have achieved in the project activity. So for example, it's gold, 4 SDGs, and then the validator verifier can verify this. So for SDG labels, we have got the same levels as they were in GCC 1.0, bronze to diamond. For ICBCM and Article 6.2, the minimum label that you have to achieve is bronze. For CORSIA, it's CORSIA first phase and pilot is silver. Again, there are rules for bundle. So if there's a bundle project, the lowest label that is being achieved at the bundle level will be awarded. So for example, same example, wind solar hybrid, wind achieves silver, solar achieves bronze, then you get bronze for the entire project activity. And if you are being denied label for the legal, social, and environmental part, the negative part, you will also not get SDGs. Anyways, it doesn't make sense because anyways the registration issue is not allowed. But from the technical perspective, no SDG label is awarded if you do not comply with the legal, environmental, and social requirements as well. And stakeholder requirements is more or less the same as we have discussed for the environmental and social safeguards. So net, the pathway for SDG assessment, you should start with the SDG impact assessment form in Excel. You identify the positive impact, start filling the outcome and impact of the project activity, identify the legal requirement, decide the indicator that to be monitored, calculate the SDG impact. That fills up your assessment. Do not copy and paste these tables in the PSF and PMR. Report only the monitoring parameters in the PSF and report results of the stakeholder engagement within the PSF and PMR, because there is no provisions on stakeholder engagement within the form. Okay, so that's it from my end. Thanks, Amit. Over to you.
Thank you, Mike. I think it was very detailed. So thank you for that. So at this point in time, we are already short of time, and we'll have to extend a bit. So I would, without wasting any time, I think we had asked them, parallelly answered questions through the chat. So we will first invite Shubindu for providing his presentation for transitioning registered projects into GCC 2.0 through the post-registering change. And then in the end, we'll take some questions. So Shubindu, over to you now.
Okay, let me try and see what I can do in this timeline.
I think even if you have to extend a bit, we have to extend a bit, I think it's fine. I don't want you to, cover everything in the 7 minutes. Of course, we can take more minutes. I think that's fine.
Okay, just let me know whether.
I can see. Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay. So when it comes to post-registration changes, there are two kind of changes that we're talking of basically. I mean, three, I would say. One are post-registration changes with respect to transitioning from GCC 1.0 to 2.0 for projects which are already registered. There's another category of changes which are an ongoing change which can happen even before or after registration, which is change in letter of authorizations. In terms of legal owners, project owners, or focal points and all. The other one was the projects which have already got registered under 1.0 and had done some issuances under 1.0 in the existing registry might have had certain FARs raised, which were supposed to be taken up when the post-registration change process was available. So they would have to reconcile them to the PRC process. So the first of all, I'll take you through the one which is with respect to the because the way that you take up letter of authorization change is a bit different from the way that you do the rest of the stuff. So if you want to do a post-registration change in terms of the letter of authorization, how would you go about doing it? So you'd have to log into the portal, and once you log into the portal,
yeah, Shubindu, I think if you can make full screen.
No, I think that's the problem of two screens.
Oh, there's a problem of two screens. Okay, do whatever is best.
I know. So anyway, I'll try to stick with this. We don't have time for that. So anyway, so if you are the focal point one and you are into the issuance tab, you have to go to the issuance tab. The issuance tag comes on the left-hand side of the of its screen. So you have a registration tab, you have an issuance tab. You go to the issuance tab, and then you have the list of all the projects that you have under issuance, right? So what you do is that on that tab, there is the submission number on the left-hand side. Click on that submission number. The moment you click on the submission number, you land up on the project page. When you land up on the project page, then you roll down, you go down the screen, then you'll find an special action button here on the right-hand side. Therein, there is a button that says change LOA, letter of authorization. you have to click on that button, which is the change of letter of authorization. The moment you click on this button, that's the letter of authorization under the special action button. What will happen is there will be a faceplate that will open up that will tell you that once you want to proceed forward, then you can change the focal points, you can change the relevant details of the letter of authorization. Once the changes are made, you have to download the letter of authorization, get it signed by everyone, and re-upload the letter of authorization for the GCC admin to approve. So after you've gone through the instructions, if you click on the start button, then the project, there will be a notification that will come saying that the LOA change request has been submitted. So there is a notification that will alert you that the LOA change has been started. And what will also happen is subsequently the project, in your view, will change from a registered project to an LOA change status. So that means you are now in the process of changing the LOA of the project. What will you next do is you have an action button on the right hand side. The moment you click on the action button, you will have two action points. One on the top says update, one on the bottom says upload LOA. Click on the update button. The moment you click on the update button, you will be presented the same letter of authorization which you had filled during the initial registration phase in the soft version to be able to make all the changes. Make all the changes and download the form, get it signed by all the stakeholders, the legal owners, the project owners, the focal points, and go back to the previous screen again and use the second button, which is upload LOA, and upload the signed document. Then it will come to GCC. GCC will check that all the details that you have filled in is okay and it's signed off by everyone, and then they will accept this change. Then your project will again go back to the registration phase, but all the detail on the project page, which we are seeing initially here, will change based on the new changes that you have made. Because on the project page also appears the name of the legal owner, the name of the project owner, the name of the focal point. So all those changes, once authenticated by GCC, will change after your letter of authorization is accepted. Change of letter of authorization is accepted by GCC. So this is with respect to the change in the letter of authorization. Now we'll move to quickly how would you do a normal PRC? So let me know once you can see the screen of mine.
Yes, visible.
Yeah, okay. So I won't go into the presentation mode because I understand that makes it much smaller. So how you're going to, so for example, you are a project which is registered with 1.0 and you want to go to GCC 2.0. How will you do that? Obviously, you have to do a post-registration change. So how would you go about? So post-registration change can be triggered by two methods. One, it can be triggered directly by the project owner. You know that you want to go to 2.0. Or you know there is a deviation in the monitoring plan, or you know there is a change in the project design, or you know that there are certain changes in the labels that you want to do with respect to claims like SDG claims and all. So you as a project owner know that you need to do a PRC. That's one of the action points, that you need to trigger a PRC. The second is you had submitted a PMR for the verification process, and the verifier notices that there is a change in design. There is a change in the monitoring parameters, and it doesn't match with that what was there. So then what will happen is they will trigger the PRC. They will say, no, there's a post-registration change. You have to go back to the PRC route. So there's two ways of triggering a PRC. One, which is triggered by the verifier. One, which is triggered by the project owner. Now we are looking at the one which is triggered by the project owner, where you know deliberately that you want to move from GCC 1.0 to GCC 2.0. So how are you going to do that? So I'll again go back, maybe it's going to be a little better. So once you go to your login page on the issuance tab, in order to be able to start a PRC, you have to first add a monitoring period. So you're going to add a PMR, a project monitoring report, right? You're going to click on plus PMR on the top. In that plus PMR, once you click, you will have to enter the period for which the monitoring period in order to trigger a PRC. You have to choose a verifier whom you are choosing as the verifier. Why this? Because there are the PRC can flow in two pathways. One is the PRC is a temporary deviation. It can be accommodated in the issuance track itself. It doesn't need a revalidation. Now that's one pathway. The second is it needs a revalidation of the whole stuff. Then you need to go the prior approval route. So there are two tracks that it can say. So what will happen is the moment you choose the verifier, so you're choosing a verifier for this monitoring report, then there's a request PRC button on the bottom, which is noted as 5. So you can toggle it and say, yes, you have a PRC request, which you want to give here. The moment you submit this, then there's another faceplate which will say, it will say, what is the title of the PRC? That is, what is it that you want to do? So you have to enter a description, a very short description below that as to what is this PRC for. Is it that there's a change in monitoring plan, or you want to move from 1.0 to 2.0, or there is design change? It's a description of what is being done in this PRC for the verifier to understand which track you have to go to. Below that, there is one specific PRC which can go in the automatic route, which is the change in the crediting period. Obviously, this is only given to you at the first PMR. If you have already done a PMR, obviously you cannot change the crediting start date. So this is only available to you during the first PMR. So then you can toggle to say, okay, yes, there's a change in the crediting period. If there's a change in crediting period, then it will say what is the current crediting period start date and what is the new crediting period start date that you are proposing to take. System will say, then you are going to add it. System will automatically see what is the duration difference between the two. And so what will happen is, on pressing the add button on the row, the request would have been created on the issuance tab. So on the left hand side, there is another set of queries which is with respect to PRC. And your status of the project would move to PRC request. That means against this PMR, there is a PRC that has been requested. Then on the action button, which is there, you would have to fill up something called a PRC change form. So the moment you click on the action button, it will open up for you a change form, which will say the description was just a description of what you want to do. The change form will capture everything that you want to do as a part of the PRC. So it's a soft form which will give you that if you want to change to 2.0, what all labels would you like to take up? What all, it gets filled up with all that is there in the registration phase. There are these which will say whether it's a temporary deviation or it's a permanent deviation. If, for example, it's a permanent deviation, then there are further drop downs. They say, what is it related to? Is it related to corrections in the PSF? Is it related to start date change? Is it related to LOI change? Is it related to monitoring plan? Is it related to a change in the inclusion of a new monitoring plan? Is it a design change or is it a transition? Once you have, if it's then further down, you have a detailing of the temporary deviation. Whether it's a temporary deviation on monitoring plan, with respect to safeguards, with respect to SDG labels, with respect to methodological aspects. So what is this? And it will also say for what period was this change applicable? From when to when was this change applicable? And a short description of the change. Furthermore, it will have to say what are the new documents that you're submitting along with this change form. Are you wanting to submit a PSF form with this? Are you wanting to submit a new environmental assessment form? Are you wanting to update, give a social safeguard assessment form, an SDG impact form? Are you wanting to also include an ER spreadsheet? So all these have to be indicated herein for the verifier to decide which track you have to go, right? You have got to then sign it off and you have got to submit it. Once you have submitted, then before signing, obviously like any other form, you have got to view the form, download the form and upload this form signed off, because this is a legal representation that these are all the changes that you want to do. You will then be allotted a serial number. So each PRC has a unique serial number, which will say PRC 001 for submission number 00004. That means this is the first PRC for this project type. So it will have a unique number which will be given. What will the verifier do? You have already assigned a verifier. The verifier will have to log in. First, confirm that he doesn't have a conflict of interest and he wants to take up the the project activity. So he will confirm the conflict of interest button. Then he will see that in his drop down there is a PRC request which is there. Once he clicks on the start PRC button, he will be presented the detail wherein there is a button under action button which says start PRC. Once they click this, he is presented a wizard. The wizard says, what is the change that is being requested? Is it a temporary or a permanent? If it is a temporary period, is it a permanent? Is it related to only start date? I mean, remember, it's only when you have an only start date request. Then it says it is going to go to GCC for an approval only, and it can go in the issuance track. If it is an only start date change, but beyond 1 year, then it will go in the prior approvals track with the other changes. So depending on the wizard, the verifier will decide which track basically this project would have to go. Say, for example, the verifier decides, no, this is a change from 1.0 to 2.0. There is a new PSF document which has come up. There is a new standard which is getting applied. There are new markets which are being necessary, wanting to be looked into. So this is a validation function. Or if there is a change in project design, which has got an impact on baseline, there's an impact on additionality, calls for a revalidation, he is going to go the track of prior approval track. So once he says in the prior approval track, then the focal point has to appoint a validator for that job. So he will go in, assign, because there's a validator needed in order to look at the PRC. He has to assign a validator first for the job, and then they have to submit a PRC wizard. What is the PRC wizard? The PRC wizard is like that in the registration. Same. It comes with certain pre-fill information from your registration, and it will also ask for the new changes that you're asking for. So you're asking for a change in new markets. You're asking for a change in type of crediting period from a fixed crediting period to a renewable crediting period. You're asking for a change in start date beyond a certain value, 1 year period. It will ask for change in labels, whether you want to opt now for EL label, SL label, EBL label, or SBL label, whether you're wanting to change SDGs, whether you want to change other labels, whether you have under 2.0 requirements under the deductions therein. It will say, do you have a change in location of the project activity as a part of the PRC? And then it will render the soft copy like the PSF cover page. A PRC cover page will come as PSF cover page. You need to sign it off, indicating and submit all the documentation with respect to the new PSF form, filled up, new cover page, changed calculation sheet if any, changed IRR if there any, changed environmental and no harm form, changed social no harm form, changed SDG assessment form, any other documents that you want to submit as a part of the PRC, and submit it to the validator to continue to go to the validation stage. So the moment you submit it, it first goes for a global stakeholder consultation, like in the initial days that you do a submission of a new PSF. It remains for 30-day period for a global stakeholder, because it might happen that you have brought in a new area onto the project as a part of the project design. You might have new stakeholders who might be interested in commenting your project type. So you give a 30-day period. It remains on the way for a 30-day period. And once then the validator takes up the job, provides their opinion, and only that it's not like the normal registration process. They approve the PRC. It comes to GCC. GCC does the due diligence. And if they approve the PRC, then you again go back to the issuance track, and then you can continue your issuance process from that point onwards. So I think that would be a very brief of the PRC process. Because of the time, we are not extending any further, but then This is just a glimpse of how you'll be able to do a PRC when you know that you need to move from 1.0 to 2.0.
Thank you, Shubhendu. I think, but also this manual would be available for anyone to refer to. So at this point in time, I would now open floor for some questions. Of course, there are some questions which we already responded. But if there are any further questions, please raise your electronic hand. We still have some time. So
I think there is
yeah.
there is some question in the chat. Maybe you can answer it
Yes.
while discussing here. That's better.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in the meantime, you can raise your hands. I still have to read the questions, very big questions. The project is registered under 1.0 and will conduct verification is under 2.0. As in the PMR new template, already cover sections relating to deviation changes to transition. Can we just request previous PRC at the same time for verification and describe the changes in new template of 2.0 only? So, okay, now the question is, why do you want to make a PRC? I think it's important if you are going to transition to 2.0 and you want to add up new labels, the new labels are the information on new labels is not in the registered PSF. So the first thing to do is to change the information in the registered PSF. How that can happen is you add up that information in the PSF first of all to make your PSF in line with the requirements of GCC 2.0. Once your registered PSF is updated, then only you can go and submit a request for issuance against the PSF, because the requirements in the PSF will become the requirements for at the point of issuance. It becomes a reference at that point in time. So if you want to apply for, let's say, CORSIA first phase label, but you have not done so before, because there are certain requirements which have to be complied, and CORSIA just released those requirements, I think, in the towards the last month of previous year in 2024. So those requirements were brought in the GCC standard afterwards. So these requirements were not available at an earlier point in time for you to reflect it in your registered PSF, because registered PSF was done earlier. So I think from that sense, I think you need to understand that process. You need to understand what you want, what you have to do. Shubhendu already told you, if this is temporary deviation, then you can combine it. If it is not temporary deviation, you cannot combine it together with the issuance. That was the first question. Then going to, in addition, how long does it normally take to complete a PRC process for transition to 2.0? How long does it normally take to complete a PRC process? In my understanding, I think the time taken by GCC is not more than a month or a half, 1 month and a half. So, but it depends on how long can you, prepare your PSF, prepare the, two versions of the PSF. One is track changes, one in non-track changes, additional documents, PRC form, and so on and so forth. And then how long does the verifier take, take to validate this information? But if you submit it today to us, let's say you submit your PRC today to us, I don't think it should take more than 1.5 months. But you can refer to the exact timelines that are provided in the program process document available publicly as of now. Okay, question number 3. For the PRC and verification issuance at the same time, we need to complete the PRC process first, then allow to move to issuance request.
Yeah, I will answer
Yes.
this part of it.
Yeah. Yes,
so, say for example, as Amit said, and I had also been saying that your PRC can be two types, right? One, which are temporary deviations, which are only applicable for the period which is under monitoring. Say for example, you have PMR1 for which you want to do a temporary deviation and you raised a PRC request, whereas PMR2 is going to be as per what was in the registered PSF. In that case, both can parallelly move. You can do PMR1 and request a PRC, which will go in the auto route. That is, the verifier will take care of the changes because it's only holding good for the period under verification. PMR2 can also go into verification. But if the PMR1 PRC is a permanent change, which would need a change in entire documentation. Then you would have to wait for that PRC to be approved. If it's a prior approval route, then only you can do the issuance, because that will become the document against which issuance will happen subsequently. So your PMR2 will also get stuck if you raise a PMR1 PRC change, which is permanent. Okay.
Okay, question number 4. After the GSC, is GCC going to conduct completed check review rounds again for VVB opinion and re-registration request from this PRC? As I understand this question, your question is basically, I think the process of PRC is exactly same as that in the CDM, which means then PRC process is going to help you to update the information in the register. If anyone wants to update the information in the registered PDD in the CDM or registered PSF, what is the process? How will they do? So somebody would have to, revise the PSF. And then once it's revised, it has to go through a validator, it has to go through, the regulator, and finally, if it's approved, that registered PSF will be updated. Once that it's updated, afterwards, you can start the issue request for issuance in line and prepare a monitoring report complying with the implementation requirements of the re-registered PSF, I would say. So the PRC process has this you can say re-registration in your terminology, has that process inbuilt into this whole process. So you can accordingly update your PSF. Then there is the other part. If we request PRC at the verification issuance time, does this require us to appoint a new different verifier? I think that has been answered. Actually, there was a previous question also on this, right?
Yeah, we have this in the part of the VBB guidance also.
Yeah.
That is, who can do a verification, who can do a validation of a PRC. If he does a validation, what he cannot do the subsequent verification and all. So it's already there. Please look at the VBB manual here.
Yes, I think these were the questions. I think all of them are taken care of as of now. I don't see any other unanswered question unless somebody comes back and say, no, my question was not answered. But I see hand from a request from Surindra. Surindra, yes, please, you have the floor. Can someone please make sure that he can?
I take only 1 minute. I take only 1 minute.
No problem.
This is regarding this negative risk assessment on E plus, S plus, which he was explaining. These days, there are two aspects in it. One is called extended producer responsibility. They get the EPR credits for that. And this recycling and extraction of precious metals from lithium and solar panels, it is coming in a very big way. It is being a $1 billion market. So now, supposing the project owner ties up with that fellow that he is not going to dump it into waste fill and he is going to utilize it in a better way. So his credits will be valued more, and your validation and verification has to see in that angle that it is not really no negative risk in this and it is being attended. And one more thing, supposing he gets the credit. Yes, supposing he gets the credit, then it will be a double counting.
No, so number one is the recycler is not the project owner, right? So we are looking from the project owner's perspective. So what we are saying is if you have a waste generated, you have to dispose as per legal requirement. Now you could, and for that the legal requirement is that you have to have a recycler who is authorized by the government to be acting and coming on premise and getting your stuff, and then after that whether he is getting a value out of it is not within the premise of this project activity.
Sir, it is not mandatory now. It is not legal.
So that's what I think I have responded already in the chat. If it is not a legal requirement, it is not required under EL to be monitored. If the project owner wants to go beyond legal, it is up to their choice. They may want to go for BL.
Okay then, right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Surindra. So are there any other questions that you want to ask? Anyone wants to ask? Let me look at the hand. I don't see. Yeah, I don't see any request for electronic hand. I think we have spent quite a lot of time in responding to the questions in the chat. I think you all can go and refer to it. I think the recordings will also be available as well as the presentation soon. Refer to the YouTube channel. All the recordings are also available there. It's easy access for anyone without any downloading or without anything. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for your time. I don't see
Just
any
one
request
thing,
for
Amit.
further questions. Yes, please.
Amit, there was one project, there's one comment that had come in Q&A, I see, which is, what is the criteria followed for migrating
Yeah.
projects from registry?
Yeah, I
GCC
responded to
1.
it actually.
Okay, Q&A. Okay, right. If you have responded.
So I said the criteria is given in the transition plan,
Okay, right. Okay.
so you can refer to it. Good. I think see we try to answer as many questions as possible. Um, okay, yeah, we try to so yeah. With regard to the VVBs to be used at the point of for PRC validation or verification, there is Appendix 2 of VVS that explains this whole thing in detail. So I would encourage you to please refer to that one. And also, as informed, we're going to have an open house question and answers on 20th of this March. It will also be around at 1 p.m., I think, probably Doha time. You have been provided information on this, but if you have any questions, please submit your questions in advance. The information was already sent to you, and it will help us and it will give us time to look at what your questions are and to respond them in a right way. And yeah, and then hopefully looking forward to see many of you there in the on 20th. So with this, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you very much, and I would also like to, join me in thanking our speakers who took a considerable amount of time and preparation for these presentations, and in order to make sure also that they provide the information that you actually need probably for the project development. So thank you everyone and have a great day. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.